All right, we're moving into block number 7. This is going to be a 3-position yielding isometric. So we're lengthening whatever muscle group or movement pattern that we're going to be doing, and we're going to try to stop it in 3 separate positions. Usually a shortened range, a more half or intermediate range, and then a end range. So we're going to get all 3 phases of that eccentric loading it up. Now, high level, we're going from 20 reps, which are primary works that we're focusing on our muscular endurance block 6, with a 2-oxo tempo. Now that's about 40 seconds of time under tension. Now with this protocol, we're going to do 3 reps with 3 separate isometric positions with 3 seconds in each one of those positions. So 9 seconds total of isometric loading, and we want to put in there maybe a 1 count as to accommodate those transitions eccentrically. So roughly a quarter of a second going into that first position, another quarter of a second going to that second position, another quarter of a second going into that third position. So we're going to classify it as a 19x0 tempo. That's 30 seconds of time retention. Now, the key difference between 40 seconds spent majority of the time concentrically versus 30 seconds spent in this eccentric direction is the intensity can go up dramatically. So as we're transitioning from pretty heavy concentric muscular endurance block to now a more yielding isometric, which has this more connotation of eccentric loading, you got to really immediately understand that intensity or the load on the bar goes up dramatically. And we'll go through each one of these protocols and what they actually look like. I'll have a video for you. But just getting in mind that we're moving intensification block, so the reps go down, time under tension goes down, the weight goes up, but more intuitively, it comes into this. We're spending majority of that time eccentrically or isometrically, and we're going to be able to utilize even a greater intensity than we would if we were just going to do 30 seconds spent majority of the time concentrically. All right, so we're going to be into practice number 1. The movement prep cars, the tactical rocking, nodding, and rib rolling still in there. Moving into 2 correctives. We're going to low pulley split squat, so my right arm is holding with my left leg forward, so a contra out of position. We're going to do 5 with a 4-second pause in the bottom. Just try to lengthen that hip extension position, get a good knee flexion in the front side leg. If you don't have access to a cable, just use yourself a band. Then we're going to pair that up with a half kneeling rotational lift with a kettlebell. You can use a med ball, anything there. We're thinking about crossing the midline, creating stability as we're coming from a low to high position. All right, start outside the opposite knee and then go up and outside the other knee. All right, then let's get into it. So I mentioned in the overview, we're going to do a 3-position yielding isometric. Now, with that being said, you want to think about the intensity that we use for the 5 in our last training block as a jump off point to what we're trying to use for this one. Always, we're trying to progress from a reps in reserve. So week 1, you should be thinking about, I can hit this for an additional 4 reps. And then we're shaving away a rep each week until I get to week 4. And I'm doing a true 3 rep max at that intensity for 5 sets. Now, breakdown wise, I have a video here. You can see this right to my left. Now, as we go down, we're going to pause for a hard 3 seconds at a quarter squat position, transition to a half squat, pause there for a 3 count, and then transition to a full squat, pause there for a 3 count. Once you're out of that last position, try to avoid a double bounce. You just try to drive up from that static bottom position vertically as hard and as heavy as possible. We have access to a velocity based training unit, like a gym aware, a Vitruve, or anything of that nature. You want to keep the bar speed above 0.3 meters per second on every one of your reps. If it's below that, on squats in particular, you're probably not going to get multiple reps past going under 0.3 meters per second for continuous reps. So quarter squat, half squat, full squat, 3 seconds each one of those positions. That's 1 rep. We're going to do 3 reps, 5 sets. We're going to pair this up with a single arm, hand on bench, knee on bench, 1 arm row with a 4-second pause at the top. So one note here is all pushing exercises are going to be pause in a lengthened position. All pulling exercises will be a pause in the shortened position. For instance, in this case, will be a squat, will be a pause in the bottom, so lengthened position. And then in the pairing of this, a row, will be pause at the top or shortened position. And that makes a big difference based off of the way we orient that movement. So if we initiate with a concentric, we want to go into the isometric. If we're initiating with an eccentric, we want to go into that isometric. We're going to do 5 sets of A1, 4 sets in A2, 3-minute break. Now, if you feel like you don't need that much recovery, it's a pretty simple solution. Go heavier. Intensification, intensity, intensity. If you don't feel like you need 3 minutes, You're not pushing hard enough in terms of the load. Now, this is a little bit of a transition here. So we're going a RDL on B1. Now, we typically don't choose a higher threshold exercise in B1, normally in this case, but with a protocol like a 3-position yielding ISO, honestly, it becomes very challenging if we don't have structural balance to accommodate some sort of B1. And you'll see this in our practice 2 and our practice 3 as well. All right, so quarter RDL or mid thigh, knee, and then shin for your 3 positions here, 3-second pause there. And then we're going to pair that up with the dumbbell incline press. So press it up, come down to that lengthened position, 4-count pause in the bottom there, drive up. We got 6 reps there, 5 sets of B1, 4 sets of B2. So we'll start and end on B1. Then we'll move into little bis and tris. So a tricep extension with a thick, easy grip, semi-pronated position. So pronated will be palms facing down. Supinated would be palm facing up. If you don't have access to one of those easy bar attachments or one of those handles that allow you to get a little bit more of a semi-pronated position, a pronated position with a straight bar is completely fine. We're looking for some sort of pronated position to work extension there. Now you'll see an extensor-based muscle here again. We're going to pause with our flex position or length position, so elbow bent. We're going to hold there for a 4-count for 8 reps. We're going to pair this up with a Scott curl, easy curl. So our easy bar curl. If you do not have an easy bar, again, straight bar is fine, dumbbell's fine. If you don't have access to a Scott curl, which is the correct name to talk about a preacher curl, it's actually not called a preacher curl, it's called a Scott curl. But if you don't have a Scott curl bench, just use a traditional bench, just set up an incline. It should be roughly what the incline was, what you did for your incline press. And this is a pause in the elbow flex position. So remember, flexor-based exercises or pulling-based exercises or flexor-based muscle groups have a pause in the shortened position where extensors are in a lengthened position. All right, 4-count pause at the top here, and then we'll hold that we'll do that for 8 reps. All right, practice 1 done. Let's move on to practice 2. All right, let's move into practice number 2. We have the same movement prep, cars, tactical rocking, nodding, and rib rolling. Then we'll move into our correctives. We got a trap 3 in a prone position, so lying face down on the bench, both arms up, pause for a 4-count at the top. We're looking to get bicep past the ears with your thumbs pointed straight up. 10 reps there. Then we're going to pair that up with a prone, so lying face down, glenohumeral extension, so pulling that elbow up off the ground, simulating that bottom position of the dip. So this is a really good stretch for your pec, but also a really good activation for the posterior shoulder, creating length in that shoulder capsule and that shoulder extended position. 10 reps with a 4-count pause at the top. 2 rounds. All right. Our 2 primary exercises that we're going to do for practice 2 are going to be a dip and a neutral grip pull-up. I'm going to give you a couple lateralizations. If you need to adjust the exercise, so let's say that you are on practice 1 and you can't front squat RDL, you can just adjust the exercise within that. And as you're going through some of these ones, you'll find body weight exercises or loaded exercises. You either got it or you don't, or you can adjust the intensity to be successful with that movement pattern. Up to you and how you want to break that down. So we're going to go a dip here for A1 on practice 2. So we're going to go a quarter position, so elbow bent slightly. Then we're going to go a half position, so elbow bent at 90 degrees. And then we're going to go the bottom position, a bicep touching your forearm. That would be 1 rep, 3 reps there. Looking to add load with a weighted belt. I prefer a weighted belt if you have that available to you over a dumbbell in between your feet. But if that's all you got, it's all you got. We're going to pair that up with a B stance, so split stance, 1 foot forward, 1 foot back. We're looking for more of a heel-toe relationship as opposed to this elongated split because we want to keep both heels flat on the ground. So we're going to go down, pause in the bottom position for 4, 3, 2, 1. Back on up for 6 each side, so 12 total reps. And then we'll rest 3 minutes and repeat A1, 5 sets of A1, 4 sets of A2. We're going to move into a neutral grip pull-up for B1. So pull your chin above the bar, elbow at 90, quarter bend, and then lock out, and then pull all the way up would be 1 rep. Pair that up with a split squat. So we want a long split squat here. Remember, we go down an escalator. We don't go down an elevator. So we want to go down and forward, pushing our front knee forward, our front shin forward, keeping our heel flat on the ground and back leg extended, all the way down to that bottom position. Pause there for 4, 3, 2, 1. 6 reps there. Move back to B1, 5 sets of B1, 4 sets of B2. All right, then we're going to get into our C series, a little shoulder pump here. We got some cable upright row. If you don't have access to a cable, just use yourself some dumbbells. Pause in the top position 4, 3, 2, 1 for 8 reps. And then we're going to go side lying, so lying down on a bench, raising that arm up to an abducted position or away, holding there for 4, 3, 2, 1, and then back down for 8 reps. All right, practice number 3, our same movement prep, cars, tactical rocking, nodding, and rolling. We're going to go into a straight leg raise, so lying on your back, lifting one leg up, holding some sort of resistance in the opposite hand. So if I'm going right arm up, I want to have either dumbbell or kettlebell or something where I can give myself some sort of contralateral activation. This creates stability. This creates this cross-body action that we're trying to elicit when we're moving through space. And it makes a big difference from a motor learner perspective. But control up and control down, 10 reps each side. And then we're going into a tall kneeling rotational chop. So chop is high to low. So both knees down, taking whatever means that you have, either a rope attached to a cable, fans, something where we can cross that midline to create that midline crossing stability that we need in that tall kneeling position. All right. In terms of our workout today, we got a trap bar deadlift with a 3-position pause on the way down. Now, one key note on trap bar deadlift, it's very similar to a squat. The only thing of difference is it's going from a concentric orientation, or we're lifting up to start or initiate, versus a traditional squat. It's going eccentrically oriented or down to initiate. What that means is we're going to replicate a lot of the similar positions we would do normally for a squat. And you'll see in our B1, we're going to do a Nordic or glute ham to accommodate that posterior chain development that we want to get here. But stand on up, quarter squat, half squat, and then a full squat, or as close as we can, with that plate hovering above the ground, right? We don't want to be resting on the ground for the third position. So if you're thinking about it, much like we did with RDL, it's probably mid-thigh, knee, shin, depending on the diameter of the plate and the height of the bar. We're looking for low handles here, so if you have that available to you, so sometimes trap bars can flip, and we can do our focus on a little deeper in that position. 3 reps there, 3-position pause in each one of those ones. Then we're going to pair that up with a single arm overhead press. One key on the single arm overhead press, dumbbell or kettlebell, your choice, is keeping that elbow in and then locking bone on bone, bicep to ear at the top, pause on the bottom here. So lengthened position there, 6 reps there, 4 sets of A2 and 5 sets of A1. So we'll start and finish on A1. Then we're going to go a 3-position Nordic. All right, I'll give the modifications here in the next video. But as we're looking through a 3-position Nordic, you want to think about, we have a clock here where this is 3 o'clock, that's 12 o'clock. We'll probably look at 12:30, 1:30, 2:30 as a means to stopping 3 hard stops. Now, as you're going through, that probably be early on, like a 12:15, 12:30, 12:45, and then drop. Completely fine. But your progression is to try to get lower in those 3 positions as you go through the 4 weeks of this. We're going to keep the intensity the same. If you're going to use this on a glute ham, you can add a plate in front to overload that eccentric. And you're going to get really strong in something like this quickly. So keep in mind that we do want to have some sort of progression. So if you're doing a Nordic on the ground or a Nordic bench, try to get lower and lower every single week. If you are doing it on a glute ham, think about adding some sort of resistance, especially if you're not really hinging on the way up, right? So you're coming back up in the concentric, you're not keeping your butt, you're not pushing your butt back, you're keeping your hips pushed forward and pulling straight up. We're going to pair this up with an inverted row, pausing at the top. If you do have fat grips, get them, use them. If you have a fat bar, use it. Makes a big difference, creates greater impact on overall recruitment of the muscle that we're trying to get, and it's going to be a little bit more intense. We're going to do a 6-count pause at the top here. We're going to do 5 all the way up to 8 reps over the course of 4 weeks. So week 1, 4 sets of 5, week 2, 4 sets of 6, 7, 8. Then we're going to get back into some bis and tris. So we're looking for a neutral grip position here. So tricep rope, or one of those, maybe you have one of those V bars, something where we get a little bit more palms facing each other or in a neutral position. We're going to do 8 reps with a pause in the elbow flex position. And then we're going to pair that up with a seated curl, pronated, right? So palms pointing down, curl on up, pause with the elbow flexed, and then back down. All right, so I want to break down the modifications. So we're thinking practice 1, we got front squat. If you can't do a front squat, goblet squat works fine, right? So 3-position pauses, the same thing on the way down, quarter squat, half squat, full squat. If you're struggling to get depth, just use yourself a slant board. Instead of barbell RDL, we're going to utilize dumbbell RDL, same 3 positions, mid-thigh, knee, shin. Practice 2, if you can't do dips, go on to dumbbell neutral grip bench. So quarter bend, half bend, deep in that bottom position. Instead of neutral grip pull-up, just do yourself pull-downs. The only difference between pull-ups and pull-downs, pull-ups will be on the way down, pull-downs would be on the way up. So pull down to below your chin, elbow at 90, quarter bend, lock out, pull all the way through. It's just ring reverse. All right, instead of trap bar deadlift on practice 3, kettlebell deadlift will work just fine. If you don't have access to a kettlebell deadlift or kettlebells in that nature, thinking about potentially a barbell deadlift if you can't do that, if you don't have a trap bar. But I would prefer if you did a kettlebell deadlift just to lower the load to make it more auto-regulated or put a governor on there, so to speak. And then instead of Nordic, you have 2 options here. You can do glute ham, which I talked about in terms of loading up within the actual practice breakdown, or a prone leg curl. The only difference in a prone leg curl, relatively speaking, of glute ham, is you're going to come up, pause with your heels pulling into your hamstrings for a 3 count there. Extend the knee a little bit to get to more of a 90-degree knee bend. Pause there for a 3 count down there. Get right before you lock out or a quarter bend. And then we're going to hold there for 3 count, extend and pull back up. Very similar to pull down or pull up. And then if you cannot do practice 4, which I'll break down here next, we want to think about doing bike sprints to simulate that 2 minute on, 2 minute off. So 10 total rounds there, as opposed to 5 rounds, what we're going to do in terms of broken up into 2 circuits in practice 4. All right, last practice, number 4, we got energy system development. Different warm-up, so knee hugs in place or walking, whatever works for you. Ankle grabs, shin grabs, inchworm, and world's greatest stretch. Inverted hamstring with a medial reach. You don't need a med ball, just reach in that direction. And then we'll do in some running mechanics, some A march, knee up, heel up, toe up, trying to break parallel to the ground every single time I break that knee up. If you do not have accessibility to do this in terms of moving or in a forward or backwards fashion, you can just do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off for 6 rounds. Up to you on how you get that done now. All right, the complex. So I mentioned in the modifications, if you don't have access to a kettlebell or don't feel comfortable doing kettlebell, you can just simply mod for a bike sprint, 2 minute on, 2 minute off, whatever works for you. But we're going to do 2 complexes with 1 kettlebell. The general idea is to get 2 minutes of work here consecutively, right? And then rest 2 minutes and repeat. So we're going to open up with the kettlebell swing. Always start with the kettlebell on the ground like you're snapping a football. Matters, trust me, in terms of the ergonomics of lifting. So back flat, chin tucked, hiking that kettlebell between your thighs. And then when you extend, we're doing violent extension. Kettlebell should float up to sternum, no higher. Anything higher is just excessive and just a risk. Right? So extend the hip, violently back down. We're thinking violent on the way down, power on the way up, 20 reps. Lighter bell, because you're going to focus on fluidity, timing, and 2 minutes of consecutive work. And the accessory, the A2 and A3, will be what we call the governor on the load here. So you want to choose a weight where you think you could push press for 10 each side, as opposed to swing for 20. Pair this up with a suitcase deadlift. So as soon as you're done with the 20 swings, place the kettlebell in your right or left hand. Then you're going to basically deadlift it, touching to the ground outside of your foot. If you have a logo on the foot, like a swoosh, you want to get right outside of that swoosh every single time. 10, then switch sides. Then we're going to clean it up, elbow into rib cage, dip, drive, punch, 10 each side on the push press. Rest 2 minutes, repeat 5 total rounds. That will be challenging. We're looking at about a 2 minute consecutive on that A1 through A3. Don't time it, just go through the reps as normal, but that's a targeted energy system you're trying to work, a 2 minute on, 2 minute off. Then we're going to move into our B series. We got a high pull, so a little less of a lever. So we're pulling or pushing between our legs and then pulling straight up, thumb to the sternum, and then going right back down. Remember, the bell doesn't need to go any higher than the sternum unless we're doing a snatch, which is not part of the protocol here. Then we're going to pair that up with a reverse lunge. So clean it up, right arm, front rack position, stepping back, try to get deep into that lunge. If you notice that elbow is popping up, keep that elbow in, keep that rib cage tucked, 10, then switch sides, and then go to the other side. Then we'll finish off with a switch row. So hinge position, bent over, the bell is hovering. We pull with the right at the bottom. We switch with one hand always touching the bell. So we never want it to be released entirely. So I have the bell here. I grab. I never let the bell go. We're going right, left, left, left for 10 each side, rest 2 minutes. So this is a challenging workout from the idea that it's some novel movements, some skill, 2 minutes consecutive work, 2 minute break. Push yourself. Remember, always train with optimal positioning. If you feel like your positioning is getting bad on your swings or your push press or your reverse lunge or your bent over row, go a little bit lighter. We don't want to adjust the rest. We want to go lighter. Remember, heavier weight done incorrectly is inferior to lighter weight done correctly, because you can be safer, you can train, get better effect, and on top of it, you can get to the targeted energy system trying to work. All right, let's go into nutrition. All right, let's wrap this up with some nutrition. So top of the level. If you want to lose weight, you want to multiply your body weight by 12 to 14. If you want to gain weight, you want to multiply your body weight by 16 to 18, right? And you're working in that kind of continuum of caloric intake. We always want to work 1 gram per pound of body weight per protein, always, right? So if I weigh 200 pounds, 200 grams of protein every single day. Now, in regards to the allocation of the remaining calories, so you're just going to subtract the caloric amount from the protein. So if I weigh 200 pounds, subtract 800 calories from the caloric intake. The question comes, how do I allocate that to carbs and fat? In intensification block, we always want to prioritize carbohydrates. This might feel counterintuitive, but what we see over time is a massive drop-off in performance when we go through intensification. We always underestimate the CNS impact. CNS runs off glucose. This is what it is, right? So if we're looking at anaerobic, high-intense efforts, doing maximal intensity with 3 positions in an isometric, that's going to utilize a lot more glucose than anything else. There's also another aspect of this. We're doing some pretty significant architectural changes, meaning that we're going through lengthened or shortened positions, and we're creating tension at those positions intentionally. That's going to change a lot of the connective tissue at those joints that we're trying to target, from a squat with the knee, or a hinge with the hip, or a pec or shoulder with a pressing exercise, or lat or shoulder with a pulling exercises. We're changing the architecture of that, and that's going to require a lot more, obviously, amino acids, but glucose in there is general, right? So if we're going through this process, we want to increase our carbohydrates, even if we are in a deficit of that 12 to 14, and we're trying to prioritize fat. The only caveat to that is how we're going to focus on peri-workout nutrition. So if you are in a deficit, meaning you're 12 to 14 times your body weight in calories, and you're getting your 200 grams of protein or a gram per pound of body weight, the remaining calories, you want to focus on the increased carbohydrates around that peri-workout nutrition. At worst, you should be doing a 50-50 carb-fat blend if you're in a deficit in this case. But we want to get the majority of those carbohydrates pre, intra, and post. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a super high glycemic carbohydrate or something that has a huge insulin load, meaning like maple syrup, ripened bananas, anything that's quickly digested that's going to spike your insulin. It could be a lower glycemic carb, so stuff like oatmeal, sourdough bread beforehand. You can utilize a little bit of fat in there, so you can put some nut butter in that oatmeal or add some pasture-raised butter on top of that sourdough to slow down the gastric emptying, to limit that insulin load. You want to get that maybe 30 to 45 minutes before your workout. And you want to get a little bit of protein, like 10 grams, nothing crazy, maybe a little bit of Greek yogurt. You can get your peanut butter in there. You could throw a little bit of whey protein in there, depending on your palatability, as well as your diet, your ability to tolerate whey. But we're looking at about 10 to 15 grams of protein, and then we're looking at about 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrate before we work out. So a 1-to-4 ratio there. And that's about 30 to 45 minutes before we work out. Intra-workout, amino acids are always going to be key. I would suggest something like a UCAN during the course of the workout here, which is a non-insulin impacting starch. It's one of the most revolutionary products that exist. But if you're looking to lose weight, be in a deficit, and you're trying to optimize performance, UCAN and amino acids intra-workout doesn't need a lot. 10 to 20 grams of UCAN during workout, 5 to 10 grams of amino acids makes a huge difference. I would also throw creatine monohydrate in there as well. And then post-workout, that's when you want to get the majority of your carbohydrates. We're looking for, if you're in a deficit, a 2 to 1. So we're thinking about, if I'm having 40 grams of protein, I want to get 80 grams of carbs. And that will be the focal point of your carbohydrate intake throughout your day, even if you are in a deficit. The rest of the day, plenty of fruits and vegetables and plenty of protein, and then just cooking your vegetables in some sort of fat or adding some sort of fat in there. It increases the bioavailability of water-soluble vitamins, makes it more palatable, etc. Now, if you want to gain weight, multiplying your body weight by 16 to 18, we should be leaning harder towards carbohydrates anyway. So you want about a 75 to 25 ratio at the remaining calories. So if I'm looking to optimize my performance there, The difference from that perspective is typically we see people who want to gain weight to be more insulin sensitive or have better GLUT4 transport systems that are going to allow that glucose to enter the cell, stimulate glycogen resynthesis, and then mTOR pathways. Now, with that being said, there is a massive point of diminished returns by having a lot of high glycemic carbohydrates before your workout and intra-workout. You usually see this with endurance athletes of relying solely on high glycemic carbs pre and intra. They need to continuously have a high quantity of very simple sugars throughout the course of a training session or a workout. We want to avoid that again by getting adequate amount of protein, limited number of fat, getting a little bit of lower glycemic, maybe starchy tuber, or like I said before, oatmeal or sourdough bread before we work out with a little bit of protein. Intra-workout, I still highly suggest you do some sort of UCAN because insulin load, even if you are insulin sensitive, has a big impact on performance, especially towards the B series. And we're doing more intense exercises in the B series. So as you're going through that process of evaluating what type of carbohydrate to get post-workout, be conscious of there's going to be some sort of impact on your fatigue towards the later after workout if you have a lot of high glycemic carbs. So you'll have to double down increasing that. So UCAN would be another really great option there. But post-workout, that's your window of opportunity. We can leverage very high glycemic carbs and we can leverage increased amount of carbohydrates. So if we do get 40 grams of protein, we can get upwards to potentially even 3 to 4 to 1 carb protein ratio. And that's your biggest window to leverage some of these higher glycemic carbs. So you can utilize maple syrup, a very fast acting carbohydrate like a pentacarb from ATP Labs. There's other ones like Carb Slam, which is basically just a simple sugar mix. Powerade or Gatorade, that will go down pretty good here too. Something that's very quickly digesting, you're going to have a pretty significant insulin load from a higher glycemic index to leverage glycogen resynthesis or energy fuel of your muscle to build up mTOR pathways to get you recovering fast. Now, the rest of the day, starchy tubers, I always suggest non-inflammatory, non-allergenic carbohydrates like white rice or gluten-free pasta. If you can tolerate sourdough, there's great sourdough pasta options, potatoes, other starches or starchy tubers like yams or sweet potatoes or even plantains. There's tons of great options out there for it. But you can increase your carbohydrate throughout the rest of your day. So if you're looking at it from a plate perspective, you want to have almost like a third broken up into carbs, fat, and protein in your diet. And then I would throw vegetables always in there as well. You're going to have a lot of fiber intake, especially from the getting 8 servings of vegetables a day, and then increasing your carbohydrate intake throughout the rest of your day. But albeit is that during these intensification blocks is we see a lot of residual impact from not eating enough carbohydrates and breaking down and having diminished performance towards the end. In terms of supplementation, mentioned it for peri-workout nutrition, amino acids, creatine, always intra-workout. UCAN would be a great substance to utilize here. Whey protein or beef isolate protein post-workout, depending on your tolerance to whey. Whey is the gold standard. Always focus on whey. And if you can't do that, or if you feel like you're getting some sort of gut issues like dysbiosis, altered digestion, you might see it play out with some sort of autoimmunity in your skin, like psoriasis or eczema looking things, or potentially getting acne. Beef isolate protein is a great option there. If you do not adhere to any kind of animal-based proteins, a good plant-based option would be something that has a combination of pea, hemp, and rice. There's no exceptions there. They're always going to be deficient in amino acids. Plant-based sources are just flat out deficient in what we need to build muscle. So having a combination or mix and a match and getting your 20 to 30, 40 grams post-workout in there as well. Now, other supplements that might make a big difference here, collagen. We're going to be breaking down a lot of connective tissue, so collagen would be really beneficial here. A good multi is always good. Magnesium, especially with these intensification blocks. Magnesium it's involved with 300 enzymatic properties. So if we look at it from the context of it's going to be involved with essentially everything, but it's also pretty heavy alkalizing agent for high acidic work. So we'll see this predominantly come in this like 20 to 40 second window. You're going to need some sort of magnesium there. There's a bunch of different forms of it. Magnesium bisglycinate is usually the gold standard, but I would throw in there potentially magnesium 3A, which helps out in terms of relaxation and restful sleep. And then there's some really other good options there, but I don't want to overload you. But thinking about stuff that's in intensification focus, neurotropics and phospholipids, alpha GPC is always going to be really good. Potentially something like a huperzine or bacopa or a ginseng before you work out. There's a lot of really good options there depending on what you prefer. But anything that we're focusing on, intensification, really high focus, big cognitive load, big mechanical load, we want to think about things that are going to improve my mental and cognitive bandwidth to go out the workout so I have greater focus towards the end. Because it's usually when we get towards the tail end of the workout from a baseline energetic perspective, do I have enough prerequisite carbs and protein to make it through this, as well as from a nutritional standpoint from what we can take in from these phospholipids and neurotropics to enhance my focus later that protects and preserves and increases the quality and the efficiency of a workout. Let's get to it.